So here we are with connectingground.org, and we have Brian Belt joining us. We're going to be asking him some questions and learning more about his involvement with the neurodiverse community and what his journey has been like. So thanks for joining us, Brian.
Yes, my pleasure.
So let me ask you, what's your story and what brings your attention to the neurodiverse community?
Okay, well, let me briefly tell you about myself. I have a number of years of experience working with people with special needs. I was a counselor at a group home for teenage boys with mental illness diagnoses. And I was a case manager at a long-term lockdown psychiatric facility in Northern California. And 4 years later, I was a patient in a lockdown psychiatric facility. And I was a patient in a number of lockdown psychiatric facilities across the country and the world. Eventually, I was given the diagnoses of schizophrenia, schizotypal personality disorder, and substance use disorder. But a number of years ago, I was fortunate. I moved into a community residence called The Hearth and got introduced to recovery classes to help manage my thought process. Because my method for many years was to drink them away. And drink I did on average 20, 30 plus drinks a day. And basically, I lived in a complete blackout state until I came to in a jail cell for some public drunkenness stupidity and or placed involuntarily into another psychiatric ward. But as I mentioned, I did get introduced to these recovery classes, and I was blessed. Because my first teacher had a clinical depression diagnosis. He was suicidal for many years, and he got into a program and learned recovery skills to help manage his issues, which were different than mine. But the thing that we shared in common was, okay, there's a way to problem solve how we can get around the problem area in a way that's healthy. And he was very direct, and just, I could completely relate to him in a lot of ways. But I think the most important aspect in his teaching me was that he had lived experience. He was a peer. He had similar, bad times in his life where he had to struggle, and he did struggle, and he was able to come out of it.
Wow.
And that really inspired me. And it inspired me to the point that I began to do my own research. I began to do my own research into various therapeutic techniques, whatever they may be, the recovery model, cognitive behavioral therapy, and just a huge range of therapy techniques for others.
Well, that's interesting, because I was going to ask about your work and how it pertains to the neurodiverse community. Mm-hmm. Is that what led to this?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I've been reading and I realize is that the neurodiverse community is sort of broadening its definition of what it means to be neurodiverse. I mean, we all have differences. Some people have differences that make it more difficult to get through life or have a job or simply talk to another person. These are just differences. You know, they're differences in a way that there's nothing to be ashamed about. It's just everyone's born differently. You know, if you go through, like, you know, just the complete, you know, evolutionary cycle of, you know, living, breathing organisms, every organism, every being is different.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I realize is that if we place positive value on differences, whatever they may be, is that there is a reduction in shame in feeling different. And I know that I realize and I see it within my peer community, is that if you give them respect, they feel inside differently.
Right.
And they're willing to open up to you, and they're willing to just be your friend.
Right.
Which,
and show up differently and not be ashamed. Yeah. And that's
exactly.
Tremendous, because that's, you know, that's a blockage that, you know, probably causes reservation. And
yeah. And I think, you know, by creating a judgment-free mindset, you know, where, you know, you're not going to judge somebody for, you know, whatever they say, whatever they're thinking, however they're behaving, that allows them to find different ways of being,
right.
You know, instead of being bottled up into this sort of, you know, fixed, you know, idea of, you know, what it is to be autistic or schizophrenic or bipolar or, you know, anxiety, you know, ridden, depressive, you know, and, you know, the list goes on and on and on. But, you know, by just sharing, you know, the common thread of, you know, being here, you know.
Right. And, you know, that's funny you say that. That's what inspired, you know, Connecting Ground, the common thread, you know, sharing the same ground and not feeling alone on an island. And that's kind of how, you know, Rich McKell, the founder, came up with the name, because it was really tying into a lot of the things you're saying and kind of breaking those walls down.
Absolutely.
So tell me about your work. I'm very curious, and I'd love to share with our watchers a little bit about what you're doing and how it relates to the community.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, I started to begin to do research into different therapy techniques, and I began to teach as a volunteer at a program here called PROS, that stands for Personalized Recovery Oriented Services. And it was administered by the Mental Health Administration of Columbia Greene counties. And I, as a volunteer, I designed and developed a number of classes related to recovery endeavors. And these are all laid out in PowerPoint presentations, very, you know, detailed. One of my majors was history, so I was, you know, very detail oriented in terms of, like, you know, my facts and, you know, the different sources, collecting different sources. I did that successfully for a number of years. And while I was doing that, I began a support group at the Columbia Memorial Psychiatric Unit. And this is the same psychiatric unit that I was hospitalized many a time.
Wow.
And basically, and it's interesting because it took me 9 months to get an interview, but I was like, I was very persistent, and I was like, I just wanted to be a volunteer and start a support group and say, look, there's something out there that people can connect with and improve their lives. And I began that support group probably around the year 2012. And I ran it for approximately 9 years until the pandemic hit. And then everything got shuttered, with the volunteer. But I did that consistently. For every week, I would come in and just say, hey, look, there's the program here. Just, try it out. And I'd share my experience a little bit, and then I'd like go around the room and just say, what's going on for you? And, and people would open up, and I know they don't open up to professionals necessarily.
Right.
But because, I was just sort of out there and very, non-judgmental as to whatever they want to talk about. And one of the things that I noticed is that, and I didn't continue that support group, because the biggest reason I continued that support group was because I saw people try out this program and turn their lives around. Not all of them got through and, got to wave the flag, say, yeah, I did it. But the people that did listen and did connect, they turned their lives around, and it was to the point where it was worth it to me. It was worth it to just go up there and initially it was kind of scary, because it was yeah, this is the place that I was involuntarily admitted so many times. But I kept going every week. And I could identify with all the people there. And I'd say a good percentage of the people did connect with me in a way that they sort of moved into this recovery program, which was already in place. And actually, I was teaching classes also, so I was like, "Hey, you can you can take my class when you come in." It's like, okay. But yeah, no, these people turned their lives around, and that made it worth it. Absolutely. And a lot of these people, the general society would say, they're not worth it. They're not worth it.
And it's probably very rewarding for you to even just see improvement and progress in them, and be able to be a part of that. And like you were saying, the peer element does make it a little less formal and maybe easier to open up. So that's amazing.
Completely. And one of the things, while I had, gone on this journey, is that I was also connected with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, because they helped my mother deal with my mental health issues over the years. And, just so she could handle it emotionally when I was going through rough times. And then later on, I connected with the local chapter here in Columbia County. And one of the things that I did a few presentations with them, and there was one point I saw an example of an artist doing fashion art at one of the galleries here that had a bipolar disorder diagnosis. And that kind of like, it's like, that's interesting. I wonder if there's a way to like, create like a whole gallery of like different, people that, have artistic talent, but also have, serious mental health diagnoses. And it was just a pipe dream of mine, total pipe dream. But I began to notice that a lot of my peers had artistic and creative talent, like some of them incredible talent. And I began to sort of piece together like, okay, what do I need to do to like, and my idea was to start a nonprofit. So I began the process of, okay, well, how do you start a nonprofit? It's like, okay, well, there's this company that's relatively inexpensive, Legal Zoom. And in 2018, our group got incorporated. And it was it was a matter of building it, inch by inch, slowly. And I connected with another counselor who had an art therapy degree. And we sort of gradually built up this team of artists to publicly showcase their artwork. And by doing so, they would essentially be like erase stigma as it relates to mental health.
Wow.
Because I think by, getting out there in the public and saying, hey, look, yeah, I have bipolar disorder or I have anxiety. But look at this, look what I did.
So let me ask you, is it an art program? Is it an art gallery?
At this point, we have an art gallery.
Okay.
And we are located at 717 Columbia Street, Hudson. We do have sort of a stationary exhibit of a variety of artwork on display. As well, we participate in Second Saturday, which is in Hudson, like all the big galleries have like a special featured artist or artists for Second Saturdays. And their work is usually up for the next, few weeks. And we participate in that as well. And so if you go to Hudson Gallery Crawl on the web, we're listed as one of the galleries. And
what's the name of your gallery?
And it's the same as our corporation name. It is Mental Health Awareness and Creative Arts Gallery.
Amazing, amazing.
We did this past year, we got our nonprofit status through the IRS, and that gave us a big boost because finally we were able to take, tax deductible donations. And I set up a method through Facebook to get donations directed to our account. And the other thing that I added was a stock transfer option for people who want to, reduce capital gains taxes. So that was huge. I mean, because there was one individual in particular who was able to give us a number of shares of Amazon, because it was just like, they bought them like, back in the day when it was like next to nothing. And then it was like, oh, let's,
wow.
take a few of these, and then, it was enough. And the idea was basically, if we can get enough money to fund the gallery for 2 years, I know that, the continued buzz and enthusiasm from our growing base of artists will keep this thing going.
What a beautiful story. And, you're opening up kind of a creative outlet. I know art therapy is something that, is popular and used, and then actually displaying it as, giving a voice and a space, for these artists, which I think is a beautiful thing. Let me ask you, you're speaking about parents and looking for methods to support, their neurodiverse children. What advice would you give to parents that have neurodiverse children?
Well, I think, a key thing in parenting is just acceptance, and it's, I'd have to say unconditional love, to just see that, there's differences, whatever they may be. And if you're dealing with, children with, autism, that type of thing. The other thing is patience. And it's interesting because my ex-wife actually works at the Werner Learning Center in Asheville, North Carolina. And, she actually teaches neurodiverse children, very simple tasks, and it could just be like getting a spoon up to their mouth, whereas before they would be like throwing the spoon or something like that. And, that just requires patience and love to get through that. And also remember, just never give up. There's always a silver lining in that, whatever cloud, is in your head, in your, dealing with a loved one that has, serious, difficulties living. But I know that everything works out. And
this is amazing.
For the good,
I love your outlook and positivity and optimism with all of this, and encouragement as well, which I can see why, you've been successful with this art gallery.
Yeah, I credit my mother a lot for that, because I know she went through a hellstorm, dealing with me. But, I know, part of her recovery, part of her managing was just that, not giving up. It's, just like getting up the next day. It's like, yeah, you could get that 911 call and, saying, your son's in the hospital again or whatever. But just to like keep the hope, keep the faith, and know that there's a reason for everything.
Wow. Brian, I want to thank you so much for your time with us and sharing your story and information about your art gallery. I want to encourage everyone watching to go to connectingground.org and check out Brian's gallery under our resources section, and to reach out to Brian if you're an artist interested in displaying your work, maybe connecting. I don't know, Brian, if you want to share your contact information again.
Yeah, you can connect with me through my email, which is, I can put it in the chat box, namaskar47@hotmail.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well,
if that
thank
was-
you so much for your time. And again, you can also find him under the resource section of www.connectingground.org. And Brian, thank you so much for joining us today and telling your
Well,
story.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. And I really, I thank Rich as well for.
Yeah, Rich is
Yeah.
great. So I'm glad he was able to align this. Well, thank you again.
All righty. All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful day.